It's time.
It's time.
What is beeping? Is that me beeping? Am I beeping?
I don't know.
I think I am. Okay. That's a first. I don't even set an alarm clock. Like I was like, what is beeping?
I'm beeping.
I'm almost done with my piece of pizza because I
enjoy
just
it.
got home from the track meet. So hey guys.
Hi.
Wow. We are here as I spit. And
we are here. Looks like we are live.
We are
made
live.
it.
That's awesome. Hello, everybody. So many people are here joining us and saying hello, which is fantastic. So that's always lovely to see so many familiar faces out here. It's very nice. All right. So if you don't know who I am, my name is Marley Bird, and I'm so sorry I had to move this to 9 o'clock instead of 8 o'clock, but surprise, surprise, I was at a track meet. So I thought I'd be done by 8. Did not get done till 8. Actually, I left there at 8:20 and rushed home so that I could get on here to be on here with all of you. So totally my fault. Doing the best I can, y'all. Doing the best I can. I'm joined here by my team, Catherine and Chrissy, who are both primarily crocheters and are becoming knitters. So just to give you guys a quick recap of who they are and to kind of get you up to date on where they are in their knitting adventure, I'm going to just let each of them take away.
Yeah, Catherine, you want to go first?
Sure, I'll jump in here. So I am Catherine. I'm Marley's blog content director. And you heard from me this week if you got the newsletter. Christy and I are both doing the newsletters for boot camp. So if you looked at that update, you'll know that I am behind everyone. I had a hand injury and I have to go really slow, but I had a breakthrough this week because I realized instead of thinking of that as a bad thing, I can just take that as a good thing. That actually, and I even talked to my doctor briefly about this, that if I knit too much, if I practice too much, then not good, hurts my hand. But if I do it really intentionally and mindfully and a little bit at a time, it's actually really good for my hand. It's a form of therapy to stretch the hand and get those muscles going. So I'm just taking this as, right now I'm learning knit stitch. I'm following along. This week I'm going to switch. I am determined to get purl stitch down. I haven't figured it out with my hands yet, but I'm going to get there. But I am knitting. So yep. There we go.
You're doing it.
That's where I'm at.
That's awesome.
Fantastic.
So I am Chrissy. I am Marley's executive assistant. And Marley jokes that when we first started, she told Catherine and I, you're going to have to learn to knit. And that is exactly what happened. So we really took the bull by the horns and we thought, how can we make this fun for everyone? And that's kind of how boot camp was born. I am an overachiever by nature and I find something and then I get addicted. So I'm actually in between things working on a dish towel for my kitchen.
Nice.
Look at that.
Wow.
It's in seed stitch, which I had to Google because I wasn't even sure what that meant. And yeah, so I'm doing it. I'm super excited.
Sorry, Christy, I just want to jump in there for the people who are listening. We cover seed stitch, I think, in a few weeks in the lessons. It's there on the schedule.
Yeah.
So
like I said,
people don't have to Google it. They can wait.
No. You can wait.
And it's funny, coming. Like if they mess up in their ribbing, they're accidentally doing seed stitch too. So
there you go.
That works also.
Yeah, well, I just had to do it. I had to make it happen.
I love it. Well, so far I've told you guys that as long as you can cast on and at least knit and bind off, you are a knitter. Like that establishes you as a knitter. It doesn't have to be pretty. It doesn't have to be anything like that, but you are knitting along. One of the things that we did talk about in the very first introduction video is we talked about all the different needles, and you guys were just getting introduced to a variety of different needles. I know along the way, you guys have played around with various ones. And I mean, I'm just curious, what have you learned so far?
So for me personally, for the most part, I've tinkered a little bit with the others, but I've mostly stuck to Chow Gu this whole month. And you know, you told me that bamboo was going to be good if I was, you know, just starting out. So that's what I started with. I love this cotton
Mhm.
for my first washcloth. And that's a very slick cotton. And I found I had no issues with using my bamboo needles with that. Um, Moving on, I tried using now my steel ones. Sometimes I'll catch myself, I get too fast and it slips right off my needle. Um, but the bamboo, I really enjoyed them. They were nice and light in my hands. I really like the click of the steel. I'm not going to lie. That's very professional. That's my professional opinion, is I like the sound of the metal.
I understand.
But I love ChowGoo's products. I think that all of them are fantastic. I'm excited to get to the point where I can do socks and start working with DPNs and really learn how to use those as well. And to dive into all these DPNs that these guys sent us. I'm excited about that.
Cool. How about you, Catherine? Especially with the fact that you had a hand injury and playing around with the different needles, have you found one particular needle's been better than the other? Have you been? It looked like you're using straights. Are you using straights right now? So I'm curious to how that's going.
Yeah, so I started with the interchangeables from ChowGoo, the metal ones, and I like how they feel. They feel really good, but I found like I was just having so much of a hard time with my hands, and I thought, okay, I'm going to switch it up. And I tried the straights. They're the bamboo straights, the 9 inches from ChowGoo, and I love them. It made it so much easier for what's going on with my hand in particular. And I think it actually maybe also just being a beginner, it really helped me slow down. I'm a fast crocheter, and I was trying to be a fast knitter, and I'm not ready to be a fast knitter. And it really just holding them, there's a little bit more to grip. They just feel a little heftier in my hands. And right now with the things that are going on with my hands, it made a lot more sense. So I think just what I've seen so far, I'm probably going to like the circulars later. But for right now, with this size of a project and where I'm at in my skills, the straights are actually working really well for me.
Yep.
And the bamboo does grip the yarn. I'm using the sheep. And it grips the yarn really well. It was okay on the metal, but just for my skills, it was a little slippery. So yeah, I'm liking these. Plus, just like Chrissy likes the sound, I like the straights because they're the cute, like this is what my grandma used needles.
So it's the nostalgia.
Yes.
Yeah.
I get it. It looks like there's a lot of people in the chat that agree with you, Chrissy. They love the sound of the needles. I'm absolutely 100% with you. It's the sound of the needles for me. It's a very soothing thing. I find it interesting that we're all in different places, you know, like, you can start off with bamboo, try the steel, start off with circulars, go to straights. Like it just goes to show that really the tool is just a tool to get you where we want to go, right? But all of us can use different tools and still get to the same location that we want to at the end of the day, which is fantastic. So if you're out there learning to knit and maybe you have a pair of needles that you're just not really too keen about, or maybe you're just not enjoying the process that much, I encourage you to try out some different needles, whether you go to your local yarn store and pick up some needles, or you get online and buy some ChowGoo or some signatures or some Prim or some Jimmy Beans wool. Or I mean, there's so many different options out there. I absolutely encourage you to do that for sure. I mean, take a minute and invest in yourself. They're not that super expensive. And I totally feel like my knitting changed a lot when I upgraded my tools, and it just made the whole process so much easier. So I just want to throw that out there, especially for people who might be struggling a little bit. So I know that last week we didn't have a live. I totally talked about it. I got my second COVID shot last week and it threw my whole week off. Tuesday was a wash. Like it was just non-existent for me on Tuesday. But it threw everything off. However, last week we threw in there some stripes. So we're starting to do some color work, which is a lot of fun to do. And it's a great way to really spice up and jazz up your knitting. We did do a striped mug rug, which I am still not done with mine. I was actually working on it, but I thought this was a good thing because then I could talk about it as we are live and show you guys if you didn't catch that one, or maybe you got stuck. I could talk about changing the yarn up and how the stripes should look. This week, we incorporated 2x2 ribbing. So with the process of learning how to purl in, what would that be, week 2 or week 3? I don't even know how the weeks work, but when we learned to purl, we learned how to do stockinette stitch. So we were purling on the entire row, with the exception of when we did the mug rug. And I told you guys that we had the garter stitch so that the piece didn't curl. So for the most part, we were purling the entire row. Now we are throwing in there some ribbing, which means instead of purling all the stitches along the row, you have to move your yarn between your needles to transition from a knit stitch to a purl stitch to a knit stitch to a purl stitch. So that way you don't get extra stitches, but you get that look of a ribbed fabric. It's actually not super difficult. It just takes a little bit of time to remember to move your yarn between your needles. It could be a little bit tricky. You could forget to do it and accidentally get a yarn over. But as we talked about, I think in one of the first shows that we did like this, I talked about how to fix those mistakes where you could just drop that yarn over off if you happen to find one on there. So if you guys are good, I have my headphones in so I can make it so that my my screen on my phone is large, and I wanted to dive in and talk about these stripes. And so while I'm doing that, you guys can jump in and help me by asking questions or anything along that way. Does that sound good?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, sounds great.
All right, I'm going to turn on my actual camera here. Da-da-da. And I'm going to mute this one.
I'm just going to grab my striped mug rug real quick.
And unmute this one. So can you guys hear me all right? Hopefully you can. All right, so I'm going to come in here. Give me just 1 second because I'm getting feedback. So I just want to make sure I am not hearing my own. All right. And away we go. Okay. So right down here, this is obviously the very first mug rug we did. Mine, as I mentioned, I did 40 stitches wide. And at the time I was like, that's a little large. That's why I had you guys drop down, I think up to 35, right? So this is very simple. Just want you to review it real quick. We have some garter stitch along the edge, and then stockinette in the body. It wants to curl on me a little bit, but if I were to pin this out and block it, I'd be just fine. Okay, so that's this one. So then when I went to the striped one, I did the same number of garter stitch rows, and then kept garter stitch on the side, and then I have stockinette in the center. So it's virtually the same pattern, except I changed colors. When I changed colors every 2 rows. So I would go down and then back. When I came back, the other color was down here waiting for me so I could change them up. I shouldn't say it's not on that side. It's on this side. I can't even think. All the colors are right there. Can you see how they're kind of wound each other up along the side? So I'm at the end of my blue color here, which by this point, I'm guessing you guys know how to do this, right? Because if you made this one, you can make this one for this point. And I happen to be using my signatures because I had something else on my Chaigu. So I have signature needles. But what I do here, when you do intarsia and you're going to switch colors, you do old over new. So if the new color was over here and I needed to start using it, I would do the old over new and then come up. So as I was winding up my side here, I did old over new. You see how it kind of goes up along the side? Yeah. Now you could do the opposite way. It's not that this is the end all and be all way to do it, but I liked the way that it became consistently twisted on each other all the way up. Okay. This is literally how easy it is to change colors in knitting. In crochet, we have to do all sorts of like get down to the last draw through and all that, right? But for knitting, you just start knitting with the new color. And that's it. Now we are only pulling it up 2 rows, and 2 rows in garter stitch obviously is a little bit closer. So our floats are not super long. If we wanted to cut our yarn and rejoin, we could, and then we have all these ends. I didn't want to do that. I just thought that was perfectly fine what I have there, and I left it. So as I go along, I'm still just keeping the stockinette stitch pattern. And when I get to the end, I'll turn and I'll keep the center stitches in purls. Now, if you caught the pattern initially, I had you change colors on the wrong side. And initially I did that because I wanted you to have some fun color looking stuff happening over here. So I think actually, if you look at the pattern, the image we used, it looks like the colors kind of, I don't want to say bleed, but they look more, they're more visible as far as looking
so
into each other.
I did the first pattern. I just continued on. So this is kind of what you're talking about, right?
Mm-hmm,
So you can see my colors are a little more on the side here, intertwined, rather than like those straight rows. That's what you're talking about, right?
Yeah. So by changing colors on the right side, that's where you get this clean line of the 2 rows. So here, this is, I mean, it kind of looks like that on the back side is what your right side looks like. But then I changed it up because I realized Catherine said to be careful and always change colors on the right side, which is, I mean, yeah, it could be the fact, but I mean, if we wanted the look to be this in the center and this on the sides, you could change colors on the wrong side. So really, you just change colors whenever a pattern tells you to change colors. But if you're trying to keep stripes and make them so that they're nice and clean, you more often than not want to change colors on the right side. I have something in my eye. Give me just a second. Like, it's like stinging.
Meg had showed me, I hope that goes away. Meg had showed me how when you change on the wrong row, just the different pattern that it creates, like you're talking about. And we had kind of thought, okay, while you're a beginner, that might look confusing. Let's just stick to the 2 rows. So that was why I had said that.
And that totally makes sense. I just wasn't part of that conversation. Not in a bad way. Like I mean, you know, tomato. It's all good. We're all still knitting. And at the end of the day, if somebody makes their mug rug that way, they could make another mug rug this way. And then you just have 2 different types.
Yeah.
You could do it however you want. So this is really just it, guys. And then you turn your work and you come back. Now, one of the great things about stripes and being a beginner is that it lends itself to a really great opportunity to really recognize how to weave in your tails. So hold on, let me get down this row if that's all right. You know what? I took my marker out of there the other day because I used it for another pattern. There we go. I'm gonna throw that in. Then I'm gonna purl. I'm gonna let you guys just watch me purl because I know a lot of you are still struggling with the continental purl stitch, and that's perfectly okay. You just have to be patient with yourself and just keep practicing. And this is the way I do it. And if you guys have caught on, there are some people who've talked about holding it like this, right? And then when they go to knit, they hold it like this too. You know what I mean? It's not that it's bad. It's not that it's wrong. It's just a different way. Just like there's a lot of tools to get the job done. There's a lot of different ways to hold the yarn to get the job done. So I'm going to purl down here to the end. And then I want to talk about weaving in the tail because this is a good spot to show you. How are the questions going along, Catherine?
Everything's pretty good so far. We're having a little bit of a conversation about the join for different interchangeables. Just how some of them come apart more easily. We're talking about the tightening tool that you can use. And then some of them, it just might be the brand. It might be, some just aren't as smooth and aren't long lasting. So we're just kind of having a conversation about that right now.
I do have to say that I love my ChowGoos, but they do keep coming apart. But I have not tried the tightening tool.
Oh, you haven't?
No, because I don't know how to use it. I can't figure out how to use it.
Oh, seriously, girl, here.
Yeah, show me.
Let's just set this down. Okay, so here's a little tip. So I have my case here. I stick my tool like in here.
Okay.
So that I just have it readily available. You see, I have them right here too.
Yeah.
All right. So so here's one that I have. I'm going to grab my tool. You see that hole?
Yeah.
Stick it through the hole. So it's like you have a T, and then you just unscrew. It gives you leverage. Ta-da. And then grab that. Yep. Can you see? So like if I'm going to put it together, I screw this on, and then I grasp my needle, and I'm holding the outside sides of the pin, and I'm just going to twist them.
Ah.
Yep. That's it.
Huh.
Ta-da.
Oh yeah,
and
that's so much tighter.
And I pop this in, and I don't stick it through to the front. Like I just pop it in there.
Right, just pop it in that part. Yeah. That is legitimately so much tighter.
Yeah, girl.
Than what I had.
I mean, for real.
Here I am,
that's like saying, "Hey, there's this extra part in the IKEA box. I don't know what it's for."
Oh, there's this thing. I know it does something to tighten something, but I don't know how to use it.
That's it. That's how easy it is. It's just
I dropped
like that.
People are loving that tip of where to put it in the bag. They're loving that.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
I got so tired of searching for it.
Oh yeah, I bet. Yeah. Genius. You're a genius.
I don't know about that.
The Godfather.
Have you ever noticed, some people are asking, they're saying that they've noticed that between brands, the same size needle doesn't actually come across as the same. So like an 8mm in this brand isn't necessarily the same as an 8mm in that brand. And people are wondering about that.
Okay, so I have found that to be the case with more, I don't want to use the word cheap, inexpensive needles, the inconsistency in sizes. The most consistent size needle that I have ever found, honestly, is Signature. And I think the reason for that is because they come from a metal fabricating background. And so creating actual tools and such for like really big machinery, and they all have to be the correct size. Like, so they come from that sort of a background. So all of their needles are exactly correct always. But I mean, I haven't found that my ChowGoos, you found out the right way to say it, Chrissy. What was it?
ChowGoo. You're right.
ChowGoo. Okay. That's how I've said it. I have found those to be good. The ones that I have found the most that are just wishy-washy are the more inexpensive ones. They're a little bit all over the place. But if you have one of those measuring tools, just stick your needle through it to find what's the closest, the closest circumference that it fits through, for sure. Okay.
And I do want to just plug too. And I know Catherine has a blog post coming out tomorrow talking about ChowGoo and what we've found and what we liked, what we didn't like, all of our thoughts and feelings about ChowGoo. But I will just give a quick plug and say my favorite part thus far has been the storage.
Really?
Crochet hook. Yeah. So crochet hooks, I could throw a crochet hook in anything, right? So like I've got a mug full of crochet hooks sitting on my desk.
Yeah, me too.
You don't really think a lot about storage. I could buy a pencil case from Staples and throw it in there. circulars and interchangeable needles is like a whole different ball game, right? Because you have to have somewhere to put everything, all your cords, all of that stuff, all the tips. I've loved that I have this little packet here that's got everything in it, and it's got room for all of my stuff all my stitch markers and stuff in this little pocket. So I do have to say, so far, I'm loving ChiaoGoo's storage option for this.
Now I like this. However, I have found all too often I'll open this and my needles will not those needles, but my needle tips will fall out. Now, granted, I have it over full. Like I've bought, like I tell you guys, I've bought extra needles and I have it over full. So I wish these were a little bit more fitted, but I've had needles fall out a lot. And so I don't like that. That's where I find an actual fitted needle contraption case, like from Erin Lane Bags, where she literally takes the bag, puts the needle, and then she sews around it. So it's like the size of the needles where they don't fall out.
Yeah.
I like that. But the overall, this is better than nothing. You know what I mean?
Right.
And it's better than most somethings. But that would be my biggest argument with this is all too often I'll just be so excited and I'll open it up real quick and my tips will just fly out.
Yeah,
that drives me nuts. But other than that, it's a nice case. You can see I hold a lot of different stuff in it. I'm always changing things out in it. But yeah, overall, it's not terrible. It's just that's the part that I hate the most is that they fly out on me. If I'm not,
and it's a good option for when you first get it and you're first getting started. It's good to have something to hold everything.
Absolutely.
I'm really excited for what Lindsay's sending us for storage options, so we can show you guys that stuff too. Erin Lane Bags has so many cute things.
Yeah.
So many storage options that are like state of the art, right? Like things you've not seen before. So I'm very excited about that too.
Yeah. Good stuff. Good stuff. Awesome. Any other stuff happening over there? A lot of needle talk. Get a lot of needle talk. I can't wait till we can show even more of the needles. Like that's like part of the exciting part of all this, I think, because you don't know till you know, right? Like you get to play with all of them, and it's just fun.
Yeah. Next week we start with Prim, right? So next week we're going to be showing off Prim. Their needles are very unique. I'm
unique.
like really excited to try them and see how it works. I've talked a little bit about how I have arthritis in my hands and I have to use ergonomic crochet hooks. So Prim has an ergonomic knitting needle. So I'm really excited, and they've got very unique tips. So I'm really excited to see how those work and what it's like after working with ChiaoGoo for the last month. Now I'm going to be transitioning to a whole new needle. So I'm excited to see how that works.
That's cool. All right, so I want to show how to weave in ends, and I'm going to use a different color yarn just real quick to show you the process, if that's good with all of you. Yeah?
Mm-hmm.
All right, so I'm going to go back to that sound. Okay, so I think I am in camera now. All right, so obviously this is the one that I did before, and we can weave in these tails, right? If we want to, it'd be pretty easy. We just kind of follow along. The process here is this. When you weave in your ends in knitting, unless you're going to bury your tails, you actually want to follow along and what's called duplicate stitch around the stitches you've created to weave it in. So I'm going to show you on the knit side, but you will weave in your ends on the wrong side, which would be the purl side. But I want you to be able to see what's going on here. So let's pretend this is my tail. All right. So let's just say I wanted to weave it along this way. So I can see that in this stitch, I'm going to go underneath there, so that I'm going to follow this one up. I'm going to follow this around, and it goes underneath those two legs. Can you see that?
Mm-hmm.
And then it comes around, it goes underneath here, and it goes underneath these two legs. Comes around, comes up, goes underneath these two legs. You see how this works? Now it's easier to see on the knit side. It's a little bit more tricky on the purl side, but we're going to take a look. And that's where it's very helpful. It's very helpful to weave in your tails with the two colors of our stripes, because you can really see what's going on. All right, so I'm just going to go like this. You see how I've done a duplicate stitch. It looks like knit stitches, right? Kind of a side note, this is an actual technique. It's called duplicate stitch. You can do this to add like monograms to pieces or decorative stitches. If you don't want to do any sort of color work as you're knitting, you want to do it after the fact, this is a thing you can do. This is also a great way for darning. And so this is a very good technique.
Yeah.
Now, when you're doing this, this is what it looks like on the right side if you were doing this on the right side. But if we were weaving in our tail, we wouldn't want these to show up on the right side, right? We want them on the wrong side. So we would be doing this back here. See how back here, we don't see the red except for those little tiny bits. So on this side, if I had done it over here, what I could do, I'm just going to take this one. It's the same sort of deal. You have to find the stitch you want to follow, and you just pick one. So I'm going to just come over here. I'm going to go underneath this, follow this. You see how I'm going up and I'm coming back? Just pick one and follow it. And then it comes around, it goes underneath this, and then it comes back to this side. Comes around underneath, and it comes back to that one. Comes around under that, comes back to that. Comes around underneath and underneath that one. You see that? See how the red is a little bit more visible over here because I'm on this side. Now, ideally, we want to weave in your tail around the same color as the yarn you're using, right? So I would never want to weave in a red tail with the green like this, but I could. And then on the opposite side, see how over here, the tail, it's very, very, barely, that's the word. It is barely visible. If it was the same color, you wouldn't be able to see it. Can you see the difference there?
Yeah.
So that's how easy it is to weave in your tails and such in the middle of a work. Now, this is the same sort of process you could do along the edge here or whatever it may be. Now, I want to talk a little bit about tails. When you're going to weave in your tail, or let's say you're getting to the end of your yarn and you come across and you run out of your yarn right here. And you're like, oh, no big deal. I just grabbed the new skein of yarn and just start knitting. That's what Marley taught me. Yes, you could do that. But then you have tails right here in the middle of your fabric. And you can't tell on camera, but it's a little bit thicker there from where I've woven in my ends. So whenever you need to finish a skein of yarn you're using, always try and finish it at the edge. So that way you can weave in your tail along the edge. It's not in the middle of your work. If you're making a sweater, then your tail could be woven into the seam. It's not in the middle of your work, where it could come undone and you could have a wardrobe malfunction in the middle of the day. Like, you don't want anything like that to happen. So it's always better to add add a new ball of yarn at the edges versus in the center. Now, there are times then it's just going to have to happen in the center because maybe you're working in the round. And even at that point, I would probably rip back to where I know I'm either on a side portion of in the round or somewhere where it'd be hidden. But that's something to take note of. And if you're not sure if you have enough yarn to get down an entire row, here's a little trick. So I'm going to use this as an example. So I have this here, and let's say I was doing one more row of the blue. And I'm like, oh, do I have enough yarn? Well, if you hold your project and you take the blue and you can go down and back and down one more time with a little bit extra. So that's 3 times the length of whatever you're trying to get down. you'll have enough yarn to finish. Anybody want to take a guess why? What's significant about the number 3 and a circle? I'm going to wait for everybody to
No idea.
catch up with the video. I know you know this. If I were to say 3.14, what's the first thing that pops in your head?
Oh, it's pi.
It's pi. And a knit stitch at the end of the day is a circle, right? So what is it? The circumference of a circle is pi or something like that?
Something like that.
Something like that. So
Something along those lines.
something along those lines. So at the end of the day, if you need to find out if you have enough yarn to complete all these little circles, carry your yarn down the length of your project at least 3 times, give yourself a little bit of extra, and in theory, you should have enough to make it down 1 more row.
Huh.
Yep, just a little side note. And that
that's
also
a really neat
works
trick
for estimating your tail for a long tail cast on. 3 times the width of whatever you're going to do and a little bit extra. That's a good way to estimate.
That's a really good tip.
Right?
That's really helpful.
Yeah, it's one of those things.
So you're not like really playing yarn chicken, because I do that a lot.
Well, you still do sometimes.
You can
just
actually try to figure it out.
Yeah. It just makes it easier to kind of guesstimate on the proper end, especially if you're making like a 1-ball project and you just go until it's time to bind off. And you're like, do I have enough to bind off? Now the bind off, I like to use a little bit more yarn. So I like to make sure I have 5 lengths because I just do. But you can always play around with it. It's a great way to use up like literally every little bit of yarn you can on a project.
Yeah.
Yep. So on this one, if I were to weave in my ends, I want to make sure everybody's saying pi now. Right here, say you wanted to weave in and they're down here. Remember, this end is garter stitch. So it's not as easy as just, around and down. Like it's going to be different because one of the stitches is knit, one of the stitches is purl. So you kind of have to bring it up and find it. So like, let's say we're going to go through this one. So I'm going to follow this pink, go underneath that blue and come up. And then it goes underneath those 2 pinks. And then it comes down back through the blue. Comes around the pink. You got to find it. Go up the blue. Go around the 2 pinks. Comes back down here to the blue. See what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
There's also different ways you can kind of weave in your tails as you go along. I've been doing that for a while. It's like every stitch you wrap your tail around your working yarn, and you can kind of, it's doing this in the same sort of process, but it's just with the stitches as you're making them. It's pretty easy. So here's a little trick though. When I get to the end here, because I never trust this little bit, I find like, I'm going to split my yarn. So I go through my yarn loops. You see there? So I end up going through my yarn loops and I kind of do a bury. So this would be burying, right? And then if it's something where I know I'm going to have a lot of use, I would actually take this and go back one more time, not just through the loops, but through the yarn I just pulled through and then button it off. Make sense?
Mm-hmm.
And this is like a combination of weaving in your tail and then burying your ends. Burying your ends, which I have a whole video for, you want to use a sharp chenille needle. You can do it with one of these, but it's much easier if you have a sharp needle that you can literally, instead of going through the whole weaving process, you would just cut through your yarn as the purls as they are, just like so, and then pull your tail through and then go back just like what I talked about here. Go back through this one and the yarn you pull through. And when you do that, that locks all the yarn in place. And that's all you'd have to do. So that's burying your ends. And you can do that in crochet too, by the way. Pretty cool, right?
Yeah. Good
All
to
right,
know.
I'm gonna look here, see how we're doing. I think I'm on gallery. I didn't mean to be on gallery on that last bit. Did you all see what I was showing you? I hope.
Looks clear
I'm
to me.
sorry. This information is fabulous. Good, I'm glad. I'm gonna put it up on the TV and rewatch. I'm sorry, my phone screen is too small when it's just on that. I'm sorry, I should have changed it back to just that. Can probably add an elastic piece of elastic to it, to ribbing. Is that what that's asking? Can you probably add an extra piece of elastic to it?
Not sure on that one.
I'm not sure what the question is. So anyways, so that's stripes, that's weaving in your tails. And then let's talk about ribbing. So you'll notice I don't have a mug rug pattern up for ribbing because I actually wanted to float this by you guys. For me, the whole idea of ribbing is the beauty that it's elastic, right? It works in on itself. And so we're making these mug rugs. To me, I think making like a sleeve, like a coffee sleeve,
like
is actually better than a coffee cozy or mug rug or whatever. So to do that, there's a couple options. We can just kind of guesstimate, how many stitches we need to get around, a Starbucks coffee. Would it be something like that? I went to Perkins today, so maybe something like that. So I can take my tape measure and I'm going to put it around this. And it's about 9 inches. 9 inches. We need something 9 inches around. So if we cast on enough stitches to be 9 inches. Now, because we're talking about ribbing, I'm going to switch the count. I'm going to switch the microphone. I like this microphone better. So because we're talking about ribbing, we have to remember that it's going to stretch. So we don't want to cast on enough stitches so that our ribbing is 9 inches. We want to make sure that we cast on enough stitches that once our ribbing is stretched, it can reach 9 inches. Make sense?
Mm-hmm.
So ribbing, depending on what yarn you're using and how tight your stitches are, that really is influences your ribbing quite a bit. But for me, I'm thinking like, let's see here. What was this? Mine was kind of big here. I'm going to look and measure this. I never did measurement because I did this when I was at the hospital with my son. So this is about 10 inches. So, and this is 40 stitches wide for me. So I'm thinking even your 35 stitches might be enough, right? But when we're going to do 2x2 ribbing, we want to have a multiple of 4. And if we do that, we want to make sure that so we're just going to whip them together. We're going to whip the 2 stitches together. I don't want to worry too much about mattress stitch or anything like that. I just want to just whip them together. So I would say, let's do a multiple of 4 and get going. So if we do 35, typically, let's do 36. Let's cast on 36 and jump into knit 2, purl 2 ribbing. So I'm going to do that right now with all of you. And Catherine, if you want to write that down on the pattern, tell people to cast on 36. And then,
I am actually doing that right now.
Oh, good. Yep. Cast on 36. And then we'll just do knit 2, purl 2 ribbing. And then once it's as tall as you want it to be, usually about 2.5, 3 inches, bind off. We're going to bind off in pattern. I'm going to show you guys how to do that. And then we could literally just whip stitch it together. Just make it really easy. Now, of course, there's going to be those people who are like, why don't we just make it in the round? Well, because we haven't learned how to do that yet. So I'm not going to stress about that. So I'm just going to do my long tail cast on. Do you have to do long tail? You do not. You could do another cast on if you want, but this is the quickest and easiest one for me to do. So I'm going to go back to my hand view just so people can watch me do the long tail in case you're interested with it. All right, so I'm back to my hands, I think. Get to speaker view. Okay, so I have a slip knot on my needle and I'm just going to start casting on. So remember, your slip knot counts as a stitch in knitting. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I'm going to show you guys something. If you have your yarn in each hand, grab grab your working yarn or your tail, whichever one. Take your thumb, scoop it around, take your needle, scoop up, take this yarn, wrap it around, and then pop out and off. Doesn't it look like a knit stitch? It's like here's a stitch on my left-hand needle. I'm going to go into it. I'm going to knit it. I'm going to let that stitch fall off my needle. Can you see that? So that's why the long tail cast on gives you that knit look, because that's essentially what you're doing. You see? Because this is the long tail cast on. It's just this is two hands. So watch this. We're up. That I'm in my stitch. I'm yarning over, popping out, jumping off the porch. You guys see it?
Yeah, that makes sense.
Around, out, off. So if you've ever wondered why it creates stuff like that, there you know. See, 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16. I'm just going to do 16 because I'm on a time limit here. I want you guys to see how to do this. So when you're going to do ribbing, if you wanted this to be symmetrical, you would do 4 plus 2, because then we could start with 2 knits and end with 2 knits. With this one, we're going to start with 2 knits and end with 2 purls. So we're going to begin here. Is my color too dark? Am I okay?
That looks good.
Okay. So I'm going to start off with knit 2. You could start off with purl 2. It doesn't matter. You decide. So I'm going to start off with knit 2. And this is the beauty of continental. You just bring your finger forward between your needles. You see that? I'm knitting, my yarn's behind, bring my yarn between my needles forward, and I purl 2. Bring my yarn between my needles to the back, and I knit 2. Between the needles to the front, and I purl 2. Between my needles to the back, and I knit 2. So on and so forth. Just keep going. Now, if you cast on 4 stitches, you will always start off with a knit 2, because when I turn my work, we read our knitting, I'm looking at 2 knit stitches, right? Those are 2 V's. So I'm going to knit them. If you start off with a 4 plus 2, each row is going to start off differently. But right here, if you're looking at knit stitches, you knit them. If you're looking at purl stitches, you purl them. And the purl stitch have those bumps. The knit stitches look like V's. And you carry on. This is very similar to front post and back post stitches. So if you've done ribbing and crochet, where I just went into seed stitch because I am not paying attention. If you've done ribbing and crochet, where you've had to do a front post double crochet and a back post double crochet. So like, here, let me show you. So like right here, right? Here's a front post, there's a back post, here's a front post, here's a back post. Think of this as knitting. Like your front posts are knits, your back posts are purls. Front posts are knits, back posts are purls. It's the same process. You're stacking them. Okay? Awesome.
I'm actually switching to my bamboo right now because I'm using Chic Sheep and I'm flying off my metal.
This is such good yarn. It's a shame that it's going away.
I know. It makes me so sad. I love it so much.
It's one of those things that people are like, oh yeah, of course you're sad because it's your yarn. I'm sad because it's really good yarn. It's not that it's bad yarn. It doesn't have bad colors. It does have more knots in it than what I would like, but that's one of those things that you learn once it comes back from the mill. But for the most part, it's really, really, really good yarn. It's a shame that it's not going to be around much longer.
Yeah, I agree.
It's really nice. Very,
I
very
love
nice.
the colors alone are just so vibrant and not easily found.
Yeah, thank you. I spent a lot of time on them.
Yeah.
I spent a lot of time. I love them. I mean, who knows? Someday I could come out with my own yarn again and just have it under my own name or whatever.
Right.
We'll
That's
see.
true.
But it's nice. And those of you who have never used like a wool yarn before, I encourage you to try it because see how it has the stretch to it. It's easier on your joints, and it just makes the whole process just very comfortable, in my opinion.
And I always had the wrong notion that wool was never soft.
Oh,
and this
no.
is actually very, very soft.
Well, it's a washable wool, so the scales on it have been removed or chemically treated, so that way they don't felt. So you can wash it in a machine, which makes it softer for sure. But merino itself is just a soft wool. Even if this wasn't a washable merino yarn is very soft. It's very, very soft, which was why I chose it. You guys want to know why I chose this? Because I decided that I wanted people who only go to Michael's and Joann's and Hobby Lobby and at the time AC Moore. I wanted them to be able to go in and say, ooh, what is that? Those are pretty colors. And what's the next thing we do? Usually grab it to feel how it feels. And you're like, ooh, that's soft. And you put it up against your face. You're like, wow, that feels really good. What is this? You're like, oh my gosh, it's wool. And that was like my thought process. And so I was going to try and win everybody with the colors and the softness and see how it goes. Yeah. So as you're going along, you'll notice that as you're stacking your knits and stacking your pearls, you get these ribbed columns. If you find that one of your knit stitches looks a little bit looser than the other, that is because your purl stitch actually is using more yarn than your knit stitch with the way we purl. So one thing you can do is after you purl, bring your yarn back to the back and give it a little bit of tug just to take the extra slack. Then bring your yarn back to the front and purl the next stitch. And it's that first stitch right after your knit. Like you can see here, after I just did that, see that one knit stitch there is a little bit tighter now than the ones beneath it. So you don't really have to do it as you go from a purl to a knit, but when you go from that knit stitch to the purl, after you complete that first purl, bring your yarn back to the back and just give it a little tug to get that extra slack. Bring your yarn back to the front and continue on purling. And it just makes things a little bit tighter. And it becomes a habit, like as you start doing ribbing, you'll be like, oh, that works really well. But that's how that looks. Okay. Now I'm going to show you how to bind off in pattern because we've almost been on here an hour and I want to make sure you know. So when you get to the end of your project, when you're working with something with ribbing, you absolutely could bind off just like we normally bind off. But for the most part, you usually want your bind off to be this nice stretchy sort of fabric, just like you do at the beginning. So that's where you would bind off in pattern. And all that means is a fancy way of saying, follow along with the pattern you've been using. And then once you get 2 stitches on the right hand needle, have the back stitch jump over the front stitch. So right here, I'm looking at 2 knits. So I'm going to knit 2. So I'll knit 1, knit 2. This is a normal bind off. Back stitch jumps up and over the front. Now the next stitch, it's a purl. So I'm going to purl it. I'm back to 2 stitches. I have the back stitch jump over the front stitch. The next stitch is a purl. So I would purl it. Back stitch jumps over the front. The next stitch is a knit. So I knit it. Back stitch jumps up and over the front. And you would just continue this all the way down until you have 1 stitch remaining. So Catherine, when you write this down, you want to tell them to bind off in pattern.
Yep, I got that. Thanks.
All right. And then once it's all bound off, we're going to leave a nice long tail because we're going to use that tail to seam it closed. If this tail is already nice and long, you could use that, but it's always better just to plan on the tail that we finish off with, because you can kind of control that a little bit better, right? It's just real easy to cut it nice and long. All right, here at the end, have the last one jump. Now there's a couple things here. When I go to cut this, I'm gonna leave a nice long tail. I can either continue pulling this up and just pull it up and it'll be done, or I can, like a slip knot, you know, like a chain right here, just pull the end through and lock it in place. I tend to do that more often than not. Then you have a nice stretchy fabric. The finish resembles the fabric itself and it lays nice and flat. You see that?
Yeah.
Now, if we wanted to get more in depth, we could have planned out to where we pull these two edges together. We do what's called a matcher stitch, and it would look like a very invisible join, and it would look very seamless to just go from the ribbing. But we're not going to do that because life is short. Let's just whip it together. So you thread your tail, fold it together, and it doesn't matter which side. I'm sure you could decide which one's the right side, but it really doesn't matter. And I'm literally just going to grab the bottom part here, grab the bottom part over here. So I went there and there, and I'll come back up over here to get a figure 8. That they're connected together. And now I'm really just going to whip stitch them together. So I'm just grabbing 2 sides and just whipping them. Whip it and whip it good. And when you're done, you'll have a nice little coffee sleeve to go along with your mug rug. Or if you want to be a little bit more environmentally friendly and you go to Starbucks every day, you now have a sleeve you can reuse all the time. These are really great to give as gifts, FYI, to like teachers and stuff, with like a coffee, not discount card, gift card.
Gift card. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And then you could give a mug rug. I mean, there's all sorts of things and ideas here. So when you get to the top here, to weave in your end, you could flip it inside out. We don't have to do anything super special here, right? Because it's just a seam right here. So I'm just going to split my yarn, just like we had talked about before. I'm just going to come down and pull this down. If this were a real thing, I'd come back up. I'm just going to go up a little bit right now. All right, so then that's all done. And then you have one more, and this one here, you can weave it in like I taught you. You could go down this way. You could go this way. You could do whatever you want with this. Pretty easy. Just decide what you want to do. And if you want to close it a little bit, just cut it over just to bring the 2 edges, clean them up. Looks like a nice finish. And then if we wanted to follow the path of a stitch, you have to find which one you want to follow, right? That's the trick. So I have to pull this down and then decide what I want to do. So let's just see. It's harder with one color. So this one comes around. So that comes around here, comes up, comes through here. And this is just all it is. You're just following. It's like tracing a line. And it comes around here.
And lest anyone think that I'm advanced because I worked on that dish towel, I literally just dropped every single stitch off my starting over for the 3rd time. So, still 100% beginner.
You dropped all the stitches?
I think it's because I'm tired and I'm really excited. So I was moving along like, oh yeah, I got this in this pattern. And I got to the last 5 stitches and it was like, boop. I was like, and I dropped them all. I was like, oh,
That's
fine.
awesome.
We're
That's
just going to do it all
awesome
over again.
sauce. That is awesome sauce.
Oh,
All right. So
all right.
you've done everything correctly. Well, now I have a little finger cozy, right? But
There
it
you
looks
go.
a little something like that.
There
Pretty
you
easy.
go.
Pretty easy stuff. But, it could be fun.
Yeah, I love
Okay.
the idea of doing the cozy instead of a mug rug with this because it really showcases the stretchiness of what it's going to feel like. And it's a fun, different pattern than what we've been doing. Not that, I mean, I love mug rugs, so
I hear
I've been
you.
like super pumped. But I love this too because it's something different. We're getting to see something else. And like you said, it's not that overwhelming feeling of, oh my goodness, now I'm learning how to do it in the round. I'm not ready for this.
Right.
I can just sew it up and I'm good to
Right.
go.
Right.
Yeah.
And
this
if
is
you're
good.
like, my whip stitch looks ugly, I mean, honestly, go get yourself a couple decorative buttons and slap them on there. Like,
yeah,
you just hide
absolutely.
it, or take a different color and purposely do
A zigzag
embroidered
or
cross
something.
stitch or something. Yeah,
Yeah.
you could do all sorts of fun stuff. Really make it your own for sure. Really make it your
Yeah.
own for sure. Yeah. So that's it. That's my ribbing. Woo!
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 Well, and it is exciting to know that this is a skill that later when we do branch out to hats and stuff like that, we'll already have this under our belt. It's
Right.
already a skill we've
Right.
conquered and it's not overwhelming. So
Right.
that's
When we do
exciting.
hats, we'll be doing those in the round and it'll be even easier. It'll be
Yeah.
really easier. All right. So what are some of the questions, Catherine? I'm going to take a drink. You're on mute.
You're
You're on
muted,
mute.
Catherine. Oh.
Sorry about that. I muted myself because this time of night is when my puppy goes crazy. So he's actually like making a bunch of noise in the background there. He's too much. I love him so much. If you guys didn't see it on the blog, there's a post this week about our pets. All of us shared our pets and some of the pets of other bloggers out there. And I love my boy, but he loves my yarn. He's over there right now making, in fact, he got I love these Chago needles, and you'll see that I have tape holding the end of mine together because they're wood. So he thought it was a stick. So he thought he would eat them.
Oh no.
Anyway, no, not a lot of questions. Not a lot of questions this time. I was going to add in there that, you're talking about the whip stitch or the mattress stitch or whatever. And just in my mind, I'm thinking, I love that I know what you're talking about from crochet. So that's another reason I'm loving this, learning this way, because it's like, okay, there's this thing that isn't new to us. And it kind of, we incorporate that in and it makes it so much easier. Like, oh, that, even if I didn't get anything else tonight, I know that I can figure this out.
Right?
I'm loving that.
Yeah. I hope that seeing the post stitches helps people understand the whole idea of knitting and purling. You know what I mean? Because that's when things clicked for me. I was like, oh, this makes so much sense now.
Yeah.
Well, even when you're crocheting a hat brim, right? You're trying to imitate that ribbing. That's what we're trying to imitate in crochet. When you're doing it in that back loop only, you're trying to imitate the look of what would be 2x2 ribbing.
Right.
That's true.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
That's absolutely true. So I feel like we're on a good path.
Yeah.
I'm loving it. The Tournament of Stitches ended this week. I can't believe it. I have a sneak peek. Do you guys want to see something? So you guys know I have contractors who make samples for me. So I actually just got the crochet sample back today. Like when I walked in the house, it was here. So I was going to open it up so I could show you guys the crochet one.
That's awesome.
All right. So I'm going to take off my headphones here. And I'm going to open it up. So you guys know Christina Ross. She's been on here a couple of different times doing, especially during the, I think it was it game day? Was it game day? She was on here, I think, helping out. And I think she helped out with 24 Days of Quickies a couple times. But she's a moderator of the Marley's Minions Facebook group. And then she's also a tester and contractor for me. So it all depends on what my needs are. She's absolutely fantastic. So she's the one that made this one. So let's open it up and see. This is really nerve-wracking.
It's exciting.
I know, right? All right, so it's in a bag. Word to the wise, whenever you ship something to anybody, always package it in plastic of some sort, because you just never know what's going to happen to the product.
Right.
Okay.
That's true. Yeah.
All right. So I'm going to, right now, it looks just like that. That's all I see so far. It looks so pretty. I'm going to stand up. Oh, forgive my track outfit. Okay. All right.
Coach outfit.
It is like, look at that. All right. Oh, it's so
Oh, I
pretty.
already love it. Look at those colors.
Look at those colors.
Oh, that's gorgeous.
Oh, that's
it's so much
pretty.
bigger than I thought it was going to be.
Oh,
That's pretty.
So pretty.
That's really beautiful.
You guys see, I'm going to keep backing up. Oh my gosh, it's so pretty. And this is the crochet one. So it used the camel stitch, essentially, you know, the third loop, working the third loop. It's a very, very, very soft, luxurious. This is the one that used We Crochet, right, Chrissy?
Yes.
This is so soft.
Yeah, that's gorgeous. And it's so much bigger than I thought it was going to be.
Oh my gosh, it is so wonderful. This is so wonderful. I love these colors. How many of you worked on the Tournament of Stitches? Are you happy with what you have the result of and all of that stuff? Like, this is such a wonderful project. Oh my gosh, this is so pretty. I'm super duper happy with it.
I've loved watching everyone put their colors together. I love that it looks like an old school quilt pattern.
Yes.
I love that so much. And the colors that some people have chosen in the group are amazing.
I think the best part of that is they had no idea what they were making and they chose the best colors. You know, the whole premise behind this, I know I'm sidetracked. This has nothing to do with BiCrafty Bootcamp, but I've always been a fan of quilting. I just don't quilt. I don't sew. I don't do any of that. And I love mitered squares. I love modular sort of work. Like, I love entrelac. I love all of that. And you guys already know, like, I love color. Like, I love color. And the idea of all the different color possibilities of putting something together like this, and at the same time, you're learning a new technique. It's very simple. It's very soothing, which is what I need in my own life. So I was like, this is where we are this year. This is what I need. And so that's what we're doing. And I think it was very exciting because I think once people got past week 2, they could visualize what was happening. They're like, oh, I can't wait, you know?
Yeah.
And that's exciting for me to see that happen for sure. And now that I have this one, I'll be able to put together this full ad-free PDF available for purchase. So that will be good. The knit one is almost done. So I'll be getting that one soon. And I'm excited to see that. That'll be fun. But yeah, I'm very excited to have that off my plate and just so many more things ready to go for the rest of the year. I mean, you guys, I don't think I showed you, but like, I don't know if you guys can see here, like all of this. This is like planning for the rest of the year.
Yep.
Oh, wow.
And I'm just like, oh my gosh, it's very nerve-wracking. When I start to plan, it makes my stomach churn. So
I'll tell you what, though, it's all really exciting stuff, though.
It is.
All kinds of really fun stuff coming up this year.
Yeah.
And I think that, everyone here knows that you put your heart and soul into what you do. And I think that that's what makes everyone love to follow along, because we know it's going to be exciting. We know it's something that you've not just thrown together, but you've put a lot of thought and heart into. So I am so excited for everything coming this year. I
love it. I think it's great. I love the whole quilt idea there. I have a couple other quilt inspired projects coming up, which will be fun to do. I'm collaborating a lot with Robin Chichula, you guys. There's some really great stuff coming out. I'm going to collaborate with Tamara again for Quickies bundles. So you guys are totally going to have to get in on that because it's amazing. Like, just cannot wait for all of that. But yeah, lots of stuff happening. We still have the Yarn Inspirations Knit Along and the Yarn Inspirations Crochet Along. We have Christmas in July. We have gosh, tournament of stitches. We just finished. So we have turkey trot. We have, oh my gosh, so many different things. And not only like the Olympics are coming up, like, wow, it's just fun. So the fun part here is going to be, I think we talked about this before, watching all these people that are now BiCrafty, like they're going to have such a hard time deciding which one to do. And it's like, girl, I've been there. Like, I so understand. I so get that. The answer is you do both. That's what you do.
Right. You just do both.
Yeah.
You just do both. It's really good. So you guys are awesome. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. Hopefully I answered any of the questions you might have had for BiCrafty Bootcamp. As we're going through this whole process, this free process, free classes, this is great for you guys to jump in. Eventually this will become a course that we are going to put together and present out there to the world. So I'm hoping you guys are loving this and you'll be able to give us some great feedback and testimonials, because you guys are the test subject, so to speak, on everything
The
we're
beta
doing.
group, right?
So get out there and get after it. Keep sharing your work with us on Instagram. I'm the Marley Bird over there, or you can use hashtag Marley Bird. We love seeing your progress. It's a lot of fun. You guys are absolutely fantastic. So we appreciate it. Any last words of wisdom from you two? Any words from the
Any
lady?
words from the Godfather? Just like I said, don't get overconfident, but be confident. Just keep going. Like I said, I was feeling like $1 million because I started this dish towel all on my own, and I just dropped every stitch that I did tonight. So,
Hey, but you know how to pick them up.
right.
You know how to fix the drop stitch. You got this.
That's right. And I got this. So I'm just going to keep on going. That's my advice. Keep on going.
Keep on going. All right, Catherine, I'm going to say the same thing to you. Make sure you keep on going and
have fun with it.
Be careful. Make sure you stretch a lot too.
Yeah.
And that goes for everybody. Like, I know we start to sit there a while. Take the time to do some stretches, pull your hand back, massage like your thumbs and your fingers. And like, I don't know about you guys. I love to put lotion on my fingers and just like wiggle and like, I want to say it's like pressure. It's like I put pressure on my joints, and I don't pop my finger, but I just pull and gently apply pressure. And it feels so good, especially if like I can get John to do it, it's even better. I'm like, I'm just like, oh my God, it feels so good. And which my kids are like, Mom, stop it. Mom, you're just making terrible sex sounds, Mom. I'm like, but it feels so good. Pull my finger. They're like, Mom.
But I love it so much.
It feels so good. Anyways. All right. So tomorrow I have a very big, another very big track meet with the track team. So I will be busy over there. It's a crazy time, but I am loving these kids. It's so much fun. So until then, keep up the good work, you guys, and finish up all your projects and show us what you're working on. All right.
Yes.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.